Sure. I also see a lot of participants here, so let's get started. So first of all, a very, very, very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining and giving your precious time. I'm going to start with the wish, and that is a very, very happy International Human Rights Day. So December 10 is celebrated as International Human Rights Day every year when UDHR was first time proclaimed. And I'm really excited and happy to see all of you here. There are just few housekeeping rules so that if we keep that in mind, it will be easy for us to smoothly process. And that is, please keep your microphones muted in case you're not speaking. Then there will be time for questions at the end. Please raise your hand if you have any question that you like to pose. You may also feel free to put your question into the chat box, and these will be picked upon an opportune time. So my name is Lareb Abed, and I'm from Lahore, Pakistan. Assalamu alaikum to everyone across the globe, whoever is listening to me. It's been almost 7 to 8 years that I've been working. I've been doing social work, but my forte has always been reproductive health and rights and women empowerment. I did my master's in gender and feminism, and since that day, I've been tirelessly working to make a change. And today, being a part of Generation Unlimited, I'm really happy to present it. Now, let me share about the webinar. The webinar features as a part of community of practice established by Generation Unlimited and the World Association of Girl Guides and Scouts. Today, we are pleased to bring together the UN Gender Education Initiative, the Nala Feminist Collective, and their partners for a discussion on the role of intergenerational partnership in pursuing transformative change. This is a topic of great relevance to Generation Unlimited as well. The GenU Secretariat initially launched its youth governance approach in 2019, when it appointed 17 young members to sit across its decision-making structures, including... Can you please mute your mic in case you're not speaking? Thank you. So it was in 2019 when it appointed 17 young members to sit across decision-making structures, including their formal representatives in the GLC, the board, and the VIPAT, a separate advisory body that is comprised entirely of young people aged between 17 to 29 years old, into the GNU's core decision-making bodies. What we saw over this period were the young leaders' success across the structures often come down to the equality of relationships between senior leadership and the young leaders. When power was shared, there was mutual respect, and where senior leaders demonstrated openness, young leaders thrived. So this webinar is intended to be a safe space for reflection, learning on what contributes to effective intergenerational partnerships. But right now, it is time to hand over. But right now, this is a time to hand over in the discussion. So let me first hand over to Ms. Rim Minya from Nala Feminist Collective, who will together provide some opening remarks and will share some thoughts on how the role of intergenerational partnerships in their own work works. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Lareb. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. My name is Rim Menya. I'm from Algeria, and I am the coordinator of Nala Feminist Collective. So I will talk briefly about our collective and the work we were doing considering our intergenerational approach. My colleague Sodfa, who led the creation of our manifesto, is unfortunately absent today. But however, I invite you all to visit our website to learn more about the work we are doing. So Nala Feminist Collective is a Pan-African collective of 17 feminists. We have the mission to foster, enable, and mobilize young women from Africa and the African diaspora in order to bridge the gap between, first of all, policy and implementation, also intergovernmental spaces and grassroots, and generational spaces. This last one is a key value of our work at Nala Fem, and our efforts in creating and convening intergenerational feminist spaces, work, and dialogues. So Nala Feminist Collective was launched in July 2021 during the Generation Equality Forum in Paris. And we are guided by the Africa Young Women Beijing Plus 25 Manifesto. This manifesto is the result of the Africa Young Women Beijing Plus 25 regional consultations and global intergenerational dialogue, which was convened in October 2020 under the Office of the African Union Youth Envoy, that was occupied by Ms. Ayeshebi at the time, who is the founder and chair of Nala Feminist Collective. So our manifesto is composed of 10 practical demands, out of which we demand for the creation of intergenerational spaces and intergenerational co-leadership. As we consider the institutionalization of co-leadership is very critical in feminist spaces to ensure the full and effective political participation and equal opportunities for leadership for young women at all decision-making levels. Accordingly, we demand the enforcement of quotas for young women within women and youth quotas, because we do not know where we belong in policy frameworks, as the youth quotas and gender parity are unclear about young women's spaces, rights, and involvement. During the development of our manifesto under the Office of the African Union Special Envoy on Youth, we understood the importance of youth representation in decision-making positions and also young women representation in these spaces. So we demand the appointment of young women technocrats and special advisors or special envoys and other positions across industry, institutions, and at every level of national, regional, and global governance spaces. And finally, we demand the establishment of sustainable intergenerational dialogue platforms to reinforce Pan-African feminist and inclusive networks of young and senior women for generational learning, sharing, monitoring, solidarity, and also feminist empowerment. The Intergenerational Africa Forum is a key example of these spaces, and I am very glad that we have with us my colleague Rahel from Afresist, who will speak more about this forum in the second segment and their intergenerational approach. In addition to the demand of intergenerational co-leadership in our manifesto, we have also convened in partnership with youth organizations in Africa, the Intergenerational Dialogues for Accountability, which were convened in South Africa, Kenya, Tunisia, Malawi, Burkina Faso, and Rwanda, with the aim to support the implementation of the Action Coalition's commitments at national levels, and also to engage African youth and particularly African women in the 5-year journey with the commitments of the international community. So this is a very concise preview of the intergenerational efforts that we led as Nala Feminist Collective regarding the creation of intergenerational feminist spaces. As I said earlier, unfortunately, my colleague Sodfa is not able to join us today, as she is the one who led the creation of the manifesto and also the 10,000 signatures campaign, as well as the Intergenerational Dialogues for Accountability. But I will share with you in the chat the link to our website so you can visit it and learn more about our intergenerational approach. Thank you very much, and I hand it over to you, Laraib.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Rim. We really look forward in hearing more about your work in the coming hour. Now, I am very pleased to introduce to our next partner for this learning webinar, the UN Gender Education Initiative. Let me welcome Natasha Harris-Hub, Youth Movement and Feminist Leadership Lead at UNGEI, and Nafisha, Coordinator of Saigon, to share some insights into their work and how it relates to the topic of today. So over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm Natasha. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a 25-year-old gender justice activist, facilitator, and organizer. I've experienced both being a young activist and leading a young feminist movement and working for an organization within the UN system. But today I'll be speaking to you as lead of youth movements and feminist leadership for UNGEI, the UN Girls Education Initiative. UNGEI is an intergenerational partnership of young feminist networks, CSOs, donors, and agencies, all working together to progress gender equality in and through education. UNGEI's secretariat sits within UNICEF. I'm here in partnership with Nafisha.
And hi, everyone. My name is Nafisha Richardson, and I am a 24-year-old youth climate and gender activist from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I'm currently serving as the coordinator of Saigon, the Commonwealth Youth Gender and Equality Network. And I'm speaking in my capacity as a member of the steering committee of UNGEI. And just for general knowledge, the steering committee is basically a board, and it's within UNGEI's governance system. And Saigon, a youth organization, has been on that steering committee for the past 3 years.
So today, UNGEI calls itself an intergenerational partnership rooted in feminist leadership. But it's taken a journey to get here, and as a collective, we continue to learn, unlearn, and relearn. To us, to be able to call ourselves an intergenerational partnership, we had to challenge and shift the power and dismantle from within. This meant ensuring that young feminist networks were within the governance system, that we were intentional about partnering with young feminists in a holistic way, and in all processes of our work, including project design, consultation, implementation, follow-up, etc. And that we have a best practice of funding young feminists, funding for speaking, consultations, working groups, and hiring young feminist consultants. It also meant having to disrupt, encourage, and speak out.
So as Natasha would have just mentioned, UNGEI's mission basically is to champion the rights of girls to a quality education in a safe and gender-sensitive learning environment, and to hold the international community to account for commitments made to gender equality and in and through education. And now let me tell you a bit about Saigon and how we have come to develop a truly meaningful intergenerational partnership with UNGEI. So Saigon, the Commonwealth Youth Gender and Equality Network, is a youth-led and youth-focused network which promotes and supports the meaningful equality issues in the local, national, regional, Commonwealth, and international agendas. And our aim basically is to improve the position of young people and advocate for their increased youth engagement and participation in existing structures. And we have 5 overall thematic areas, one of which is youth transitions. And here we focus on gender in the context of employment, entrepreneurship, and education. So both Saigon and UNGEI are committed to breaking down barriers to education and closing the gender gap in education and unlocking its potential to transform the lives of young people across the globe. So when you see 2 organizations, 2 networks with such similar aims and goals, it's clear that that's a perfect opportunity to work together in this particular area. So Saigon and UNGEI formed an intergenerational partnership which has improved cooperation, interaction, and exchange between Saigon's youth membership and the UNGEI team, which focuses on youth, for instance, with Transform Education, like you would hear a bit later in the webinar, but also across different generations. And this partnership has allowed for the sharing of talents and resources and supporting each other in other partnerships and other collaborations that benefit both UNGEI and Saigon's communities. And I'll give you 2 quick examples of how we have both benefited from this intergenerational partnership. So for instance, with the steering committee, although UNGEI's Global Advisory Committee forms the membership of UNGEI, there is a subset of the Global Advisory Committee, which makes up the steering committee. And this is basically responsible for providing strategic guidance to the work of the partnership. And Saigon is a member of the steering committee. And I can tell you firsthand that the interaction, it's not tokenistic and it's not a box checking move. It's a really high level interaction and partnership that is truly monumental that I'm sure many other organizations can implement. UNGEI is ensuring that they not only engage youth, but they give youth the chance to lead at the highest level of their own internal leadership, ensuring that the youth perspective is always included in their strategic goals. And from Saigon's perspective, in January of 2020, we launched a campaign called Reform 53, with the aim of compelling Commonwealth countries to commit to reforming laws that discriminate against women and girls and LGBT plus people. And, we're a network of about 192 activists. So trying to convince Commonwealth leaders to reform laws, it's not an easy task. So we noticed, okay, we have our amazing partners at UNGEI. Why not lean on them? Why not use their strengths, their partnerships to help us to achieve our goal? So we were able to lean on UNGEI to review and give input on the campaign and the goals before we even launched. And then afterwards, UNGEI supported us with, sharing the campaign with their membership and the importance of legal reform on their social media. So those are just two concrete examples of how UNGEI and Saigon have benefited from an intergenerational partnership. And we look forward to learning and sharing throughout the rest of this dialogue. And we hope that collectively we continue to challenge traditional power structures within our organizations to truly be able to work intergenerationally and achieve our goals. So thank you so much for listening to us. And we look forward to the rest of the webinar. In solidarity, Nafisha and Natasha.
Thank you so much. I think for a lot of young people who are here with us as a participant, it's a great opportunity to get connected to such inspiring leaders. Because I think that, as you have shared, the approach to tokenism has actually pushed a lot of young people in a lot of ways. And it's really important to highlight such initiatives like yours, like GenU, where young people are actually the decision body. They're actually making decisions and an impact. So thank you so much. Now I will hand over this to my colleague, Saida Raim Hussain, who will guide us to the next segment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Larib. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone from wherever you're calling in from. So my name is Saida Raim Hussain, and I am the program director at Afresist, which is the convening organization of the Nala Feminist Collective and the Intergenerational Africa Forum. So the purpose of this section of this webinar or learning series is to really showcase and share initiatives and best practices of intergenerational gatherings and spaces that already exist in different parts of the world in different contexts. So in the practice of Afresist and the Nala Feminist Collective, we will be sitting in virtual circle for this session. And this means that we listen without judgment, and we really slow down and listen to the experiences and what is being shared in circle. We also offer what we can and ask for what we need. And there's a tech team on board. So if you're having issues with any technical issues, or any clarification on certain areas, please do feel free to note it down in the chat box. And we also acknowledge that silence is also part of the conversation. And so if a time comes where there is this awkward silence, let's listen to what is being said in this space, acknowledge it, and let it pass. So I'm really happy to have on this panel in this circle Rahel Sabatu, who is the research director at Afresist and also co-host of the Intergenerational Africa Forum. We also have Alinef Malonje, who is the founder of the Warner Collective and member of Transform Education, as well as Sujata Burdoli, who is the coordinator of the Global Working Program to End School-Related Gender-Based Violence. We also have Nefeli Femeli, who is the Global Programs Manager from the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, and Susanna Sayeg, who is a women's researcher and team member of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. So what you'll also notice within this session is a showcase of intergenerational dialogue between the 3 case studies. So I hope you learn a lot. And I look forward to all the presentations of the 3 case studies. So over to you, Rahel. So we have about, let's say, 8 minutes per case study so that we can open up space for contributions, comments, thoughts from the rest of the audience. Rahel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Reem. And thank you to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak of the Intergenerational Africa Forum that's run by Afresist. Again, my name is Rahel Waldasbatu. I am the research director for Afresist. I'm also a PhD candidate in global politics. Prior to deciding to pursue a career in academia, I've been a youth activist for, at least 10 years. And within that job, as a young Eritrean, I am an Eritrean national, I was introduced to these different ways of having intergenerational dialogue. Like most African countries, Eritrea is a post-colonial, post-conflict country. And it's been very important for the younger generations and the older ones to communicate or to learn from each other. The reasons stemming from just knowing one's history, but also to learn of, past mistakes, past challenges, so we don't repeat it again as young people. Later on, when we started to, me, Reem, and Ayesha, when we started to come together with other youth activists from across the continent to form Afresist, it became integral for all of us that we continue to make sure to have intergenerational dialogue within the youth leadership program. And then also this impact project that we have, Intergenerational Africa Forum. It's been very important and also very impactful for the same reasons, right? We learn about the past. We learn from past lessons. We let elders understand our grievances as young people. And we also demonstrate to them that we are capable of leading alongside them, supporting them. And that with enough empowerment and the giving of space and resources, this type of co-leadership can take place. So the Intergenerational Africa Forum supports young people's struggles around the causes and the causes that are important to them, and contributes to building a global and Pan-African community around locally situated youth-led projects. It is about powering change, and it's not this kind of bureaucratic platform of, just of webinars or this type of thing, right? It literally is organized as a dialogue where both elders and young people can speak freely, right? We pay a lot of attention to the space, because due to the pandemic now, it's mostly a virtual space, but it's very important that we create a conducive environment for this type of dialogue to happen. Also, the forum focuses on delivering kind of 3 outputs. There's the learning and documentation part, storytelling, and then also resourcing for co-leadership. In terms of learning and documentation, the knowledge and experience that is shared during these sessions that we organize as the Intergenerational Africa Forum is documented through facilitated dialogue, capacity developments, community-to-community conversations, and peer-to-peer learning. We also encourage storytelling to spotlight young people who might be at risk or have like a certain particular issue that they find very important, so that to galvanize political support from the elders, right? I'm using the word elders quite loosely, but what I mean basically is older people who have influence, who have power, who might develop or implement policies at much higher levels. By spotlighting the grievances and the issues of young people, the young people then galvanized to get political support and solidarity with the elders. And by creating this solidarity, they hope with this kind of co-leadership to bring about change, positive change towards their society. There's also the issue of resourcing, right? The forum encourages direct investment in youth-led citizen action, with young activists, change makers, and community leaders around the struggles of social and environmental justice, as well as different types of governance reforms. Now, let me just kind of wrap up by explaining what this type of space, or how this type of space is felt for the participants, including myself. So, especially when it comes to Africa, there are global kind of mainstream narratives that have conditioned a lot of us young people to think that the older generation has failed us because we don't see our community or society reaching its full potential, or because we recognize the different challenges, often challenges that exist because of colonial legacies. We are geared to think that, oh yes, the past efforts, the past revolutions have failed us, and there's a lot of subliminal messages about that, that feeds that type of understanding from various things. International media, the way that people around the globe write about or create movies about Africa. There's a lot of stereotypes that have this type of negative effect on young people. And so a lot of young people are geared to understand, or at least to misunderstand or misinterpret what the elders say and think, or what they've done in the past, to see it as a failure. But when we actually create this circle of dialogue, not only has it been a safe space, it's turned into a space of real healing. First and foremost, the elders have been very accommodating, very understanding, in all senses of the word, supportive, to a point where a lot of us literally find ourselves in our emotions. Like we have to, turn off the camera because we need to, remove the tears from our eyes. It's become such a beautiful space. They give us very practical advice. And they make commitments. They make promises to us of, like we will do this, or we will, this is in our power, and this is what we will do for you in some sense of co-leadership. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up. It's not only an important initiative that we take as Afresist. It is imperative that this type of intergenerational dialogue takes place, because it builds the type of partnerships that we need in order to make the world a better place, right? Young people, just by sheer number of years that they've been alive, do not have much experience, as older people. The older people also do not have as much knowledge as maybe young people when it comes to things like, technology and innovative tools, whatever. But by coming together, you have, great minds, resourceful people, having a respectful dialogue to bring about the change that they want. And, especially take into consideration, at a time of pandemic, or, the issue of, climate change, where our very existence as a species is under question. These type of things, it's very important. It's very important that we have this this co-leadership, because the challenges that we experience need real solutions. And so that's why we have this impact project, Intergenerational Africa Forum.
Thank you so much, Rahel. It's always a pleasure listening to you speak. And thank you for highlighting, just the importance of these intergenerational spaces, whether it's working or just dialogue as being spaces to connect to our past, to connect to our history for generations, and also a space for healing. I'd like to hand over to Sujata and Alinep, who will take us through the Young Feminist Coalition that's hosted by UNGEI. Sujata?
Thank you for inviting me to the space. So I think we've been asked to speak about a particular instance of collaboration and intergenerational organizing in relation to the 16 Days of Activism. My name is Sujata Bordaloy, and I coordinate the Global Working Group to End School-Related Gender-Based Violence. It's a coalition of organizations, UN agencies, education unions, ministries, in some instances, and young youth feminist networks, working to end school-related gender-based violence. So we've got three areas where we work around advocacy, around generating standards, tools, and guidance, and then around advancing research and evidence. We've been around for about 6 years now, since 2014. We're co-hosted by UNGEI, UN Girls Education Initiative, and UNESCO. And we've had an interesting journey with young people, including young people in the coalition. It started off obviously as a group of organizations, mostly situated in the global north, mostly big INGOs, UN agencies, and big donors. That's how it started. And then as I came in and started to have more collaboration and more listening, I think, of what was actually going on. And so the issue of gender-based violence in and around education spaces was a big issue, which was largely hidden when this coalition was formed. Education was seen as a safe space, and there wasn't a big acknowledgement of the fact that gender-based violence also occurs in education spaces, between students, teachers, and between peers. So as we started to, bring light to this issue, we had a lot of, organizations reaching out to me, emailing from Kenya, from Uganda, from various parts of the world, wanting to join and be part of this. And then we had organizationally UNGEI also focusing on young people and wanting more of a intergenerational partnership. And I always was trying to explore how we could make this participation meaningful. So beyond people have said about tokenism, and beyond having young people attend trainings or workshops or speak at events. So that's been an interesting journey, and this year has been perhaps the most meaningful. We started working with young people in 2017, I want to say, largely campaigning around, highlighting voices of young people, their experience of violence in and around schools, taking action, developing calls to action, things like that. This year, we partnered actively with TE, and the process has been really engaging because we had the TE membership actually feed into the planning of the campaign itself. I'm going to hand over to Alinafe to speak a little bit about TE, Transform Education, and her engagement, and then maybe we'll go back and forth. Alinafe, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Alinafe Malonje. I am a writer, creative, and young feminist from Lilongwe, Malawi. I co-founded an arts collective and social enterprise here called Warner Collective, which is now a member of Transform Education. And Transform Education is a coalition of young feminist networks that's hosted and incubated by UNGEI. So for these 16 days of activism, I've been working with UNGEI and the SRGBV working group to coordinate the 16 days of activism activities. And that is the intergenerational partnership that we want to speak about. So the plan was that we have had multiple solidarity circles around the world that were facilitated by different Transform Education organizations. And I was working with UNGEI to facilitate these. And the process itself of not only facilitating these solidarity circles, but working with UNGEI and the working group has been really like enlightening and insightful for me as a young feminist, working with older feminists and working with an organization, because I think I'm used to organizing kind of individually and in little pockets here in Malawi. So now to like work within an organization has been a different experience for me. And working with Sujata as well, with the working group. I think because we were asked to come speak here, I was really reflecting today about some of the key learnings, the things that I've learned from this experience, and how I'm really, when I think of school-related gender-based violence, I usually think of it from the perspective of the student, because I am young and I have been a student for the majority of my life. So that's how I approach it. But when I started working with the working group, I remember our first meeting when we were brainstorming ideas on what we should do for 16 days. There were a lot of ideas on teachers and engaging teachers. And that's not, strangely enough, that's not an approach I'd usually ever had. I always think about students and how do we help students? How do we heal students? How do we create methods for them to report and all of that? And I never really think of teachers, because teachers are a huge factor when it comes to school-related gender-based violence. Teachers could be possible perpetrators. Teachers could also be possible survivors of GBV. Teachers as healers, as mediators, as first responders. So just being in the working group just opened that up for me and made me realize that, like, okay, there's this whole other aspect of this that you haven't been thinking of. And I think also another thing that I was reflecting on was the facilitator's guide. We developed a facilitator's guide for different organizations to facilitate solidarity circles around the world. And it's basically just a guide that anyone can use. Actually, it's online. Maybe we can put a link in the chat, but it's a guide that you can use if you want to set up a session, a healing session with students, with anyone who's possibly experienced GBV, SRGBV, or just like a moment, just wants a moment for healing and a moment for vulnerability. So we developed this guide alongside other organizations, other individuals, and even the process of developing that guide was kind of new for me. Again, I think I'm used to working individually or with other young feminists, but now even just because we're working on a Google Doc and we're all inputting our ideas, and it's really enlightening to see someone writing in real time on Google Doc and seeing how their mind works. Because I think I was developing the guide with this approach of like, okay, let me include mindfulness. And I was really thinking about mindfulness and care and wellness, and that's what I was including in the guide. But a lot of our colleagues would also add other things. There were people adding things of issues to do with longevity and sustainability. And that was making me think that, okay, that's actually an important aspect as well. So just because we were working with a diverse group of people, an intergenerational group of people, it kind of opened up all these aspects that I hadn't thought of. I don't know whether to pass back to you, Sujata, or if we're out of time I feel like you're about to tell us we're out of time.
Yeah, and it has been a for me, I think as an elder, I like that word, but not really. Yeah, it was a very organic process, and it was about creating space, trusting, creating space for leadership and trusting that this kind of a process where we have a Google Doc and we're going to produce a document which is going to be open source, which is going to go under the banner of UNGEI. It's an UN organization, and we have a lot of leeway as UNGEI compared to other UN organizations, we have to say, because something like this has to go through at least 5 levels of approval in other spaces, but with us, it was fairly easy. But it was a very enlightening experience to have Ali Nafe and colleagues from TE feeding into a live document talking about mindfulness, talking about healing and solidarity, and how important that is for young people to heal from experiences. So more than from a policy perspective, you often think about issues like that. Oh, we need to make reporting systems available, and we need to make sure that there is sanctions for people who are perpetrating. Whereas young people, Ali Nafe prioritized healing and space for sharing as the most important thing. So which was a really great insight for us to think about. I think that's it for us.
Thank you so much, Sujata and Ali Nafe. I mean, your work is great. I definitely agree that, as a feminist organization ourselves, it is, and the youth feminist organizations, we do tend to look at different issues through a youth lens. But it really is when we connect and we have this intergenerational space and intergenerational working space that you then see elements like, I think, like Nafe mentioned, teachers being a group that needs to be engaged as well in some of these discussions, and really only comes to the fore when you are in an intergenerational space and you're listening from other elder feminists who are teachers, who are academics, and are there to tell young people that this sector, this category of people need to be engaged because they can be problematic as well in the discourse. Thank you for also mentioning the need for these spaces and how they create spaces of trust, and really working with elders in a way where the youth and the elders trust each other to share ideas, even on a Google document. So thank you for also sharing that practical way in these COVID times for us to work with our elders and across generations. I'm really happy to now introduce Nefeli and Susanna from the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. This is an organization that I think is also structured intergenerationally, and gets me anyway thinking about how we as the current youth generation ensure in our structures as feminist collectives that we do not create another generational gap. So over to you, Nefeli and Susanna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nefeli Themeli. I am from the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. We are very honored and happy to joining this panel. And I'm one of the organizing partners for this webinar. And I'm pleased to join you in this very important discussion. And it's been a pleasure to hear about all the incredible work the organization Afresist I share the panel today. Intergenerational relations really function as a core ingredient to meaningful youth engagement approach. And we can design the most beautiful program in the world where young women are envisaged as equal co-partners and co-leaders. But unless we consider and explicitly address the dynamic between young and old, these initiatives often fail to accomplish transformative vision they set out to achieve. So many times when we also visit different countries to deliver programming and training, in our participants and in the trainings, we often, like with the Stop the Violence campaign, we invite girl guides from specific ages, let's say 18 to 30, but we always invite the senior leadership team of the organization to make sure that they understand they are part of this training, and they also understand their role in this programming and the vision that the girls are having, for example, to be their own girl-led advocacy campaign. In many ways, intergenerational partnerships are part of the very fabric of Girl Guiding and Girl Scouting movement. It is rooted very much in our methodology, our unique Girl Guiding and Girl Scouting methodology, and generally the girl experience. So when we first join on a troop or a unit, the leaders will learn from commit, often in a very personal and mostly voluntary capacity, supporting girls to build new skills and practice their own leadership. And then when we decide to stand for leadership position ourselves, we rely on those senior leaders on boards to endorse our candidacy. Every Girl Guide and Girl Scout has a story to share about a mentor and an older woman that supported her to play an outside role, and she never felt that it was achievable. And myself, as a Girl Guide, I've been a Girl Guide in Greece. I can verify that. While most women across this movement will agree that young women's leadership is absolutely vital, and most will even say that they are motivated daily by this goal, we still find that young women struggle to obtain positions of leadership and really influence, although we find that it's slowly changing. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Susanna Sayed, who will be sharing her recent experiences of leading a process together with other young women across the movement. Together, they set out to understand why women are not represented in decision-making roles and have been working over the past 2 years to change this reality. Over to you, Susanna.
Thank you, Nefeli, for introducing my presentation, and thank you to the organizers for having us. I will share my screen. Okay, I suppose you can see it. So I am presenting this to you today as a Young Women Research Team member. I've been working I worked actually, because it's over now, for 2 years on a research on young women in governance for the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. And I'll be talking to you about how we found out about the importance of intergenerational partnership in supporting and enabling youth-led action. So it's better like this. So just very briefly, so WAGGGS, or the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, is the largest voluntary movement dedicated to educating and empowering girls and young women in the world. We are 10 million girls and young women from 152 countries. So I'll briefly talk to you about the status of young women's leadership across the girl guiding and girl scouting movement. So the World Board of WAGGGS has 1 young woman out of 17 members. And I think that it's important here to say that when I say young women, it's under 30 years of age. And when it comes to the regional committees, because these 152 countries are split into regions, into 5 different regions, in these regional committees, we have 1 young woman out of 6 in Europe, same for Africa, same for Arab, same for Western Hemisphere, and no young women in the Asia Pacific Regional Committee. When it comes to the national boards, of course, I cannot give you numbers. We're talking about 152 countries. But young women tend to be more represented in national boards when it comes to national boards. So again, very briefly, what is a World Conference, or what happens in the World Conference that is interesting to us today during this webinar? So the World Conferences are held once each 3 years. And during these World Conferences, a lot of things happen. The World Board is elected, but mostly motions are put forward and voted on. So these motions are put forward by countries in order to make different aspects of WAGGGS better. I'm going to sum it up this way. So what is Motion 32? The research, I told you at the beginning that I was a part of a research team. So this research team worked on a motion that is Motion 32. And this motion was put forward by a group of countries 4 years ago now, in 2017. And it tasked the World Organization with conducting a research project to explore why more young women were not standing for governance roles within the movement, and to identify recommendations on how to improve this. So this was mainly what the research was about. So the different steps that led to the last World Conference that was in July were mainly, we had to come up with key motions to be put forward at the World Conference of 2021. We shared the final report of the project with all regions. We had dissemination webinars with key senior leaders at the regional level, as well as the global level, and also on the national levels. And of course, the social media campaign. So the next slides I'm going to share with you now depict the work at the regional levels that helped to build the agenda across the movement and created space for bringing older women and senior leaders on board with the work. So at the regional levels, this led to young women being elected to the committees in most of the regions, and to motions related to young women involvement being passed. So these are pictures from the Africa Regional Conference in 2019. So in Africa, one motion related to young women involvement was passed. In the Arab region, 2 motions were passed. In Asia Pacific, 3. In Europe, 1 motion was passed. And in the Western Hemisphere, 3 motions were passed. And I wanted to talk here about one of the motions that were passed in the Western Hemisphere Regional Conference, and it recommended that the region implements an ongoing mentorship program, which serves to connect regional young women candidates with individuals in current or past decision-making roles, so with elder people, on the regional and on the global level. So it did encourage a lot of intergenerational partnership. Now, one of the main objectives I talked to you about, one of the main objectives of the research was to pass motions related to young women, and like what the research was aiming at. So I will not talk to you about these motions in details, but just it is important for me to say that these 7 motions that were put forward as a result of the research, they all passed. And even though these motions were directly related to young women involvement, these motions were voted by the older generation. So we can see here how important it is to have this intergenerational partnership, without which young women would not be able to have these motions that would serve them voted. I'll briefly mention the Making the Case project that I had the chance to work on with Mishka. Just key findings of these case studies. So they were like interviews conducted with some young women on the regional and national level. And we found out they talked about the importance of strong allyship between young women and senior leaders, and how senior leaders are particularly passionate and committed forged the way to young women so they could reach these decision-making roles. And one last point is the importance of having the support of the wider board or committee for young women in order to reach these decision-making roles. So these are just like quick pictures of some of the young women we interviewed for these case studies. And I'll quickly wrap up to say that for us, young women, and especially in WAGGGS and in the Young Women Research Team, intergenerational partnership, like succeeding in establishing proper intergenerational partnership, would be creating spaces which are co-owned and co-led by everyone. So we need to bridge gaps. We want everyone to participate and to have interest in doing that, because it has to be two sides of the coin and it can't be just one. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna and the team from WAGGGS. It's really interesting. I mean, so here in the African context, Girl Guides and Girl Scouts are one of the biggest youth organizations on our continent. So we often, you know, as a collective at Nala as well, when we're in spaces and we're talking, we often, you know, find these people who are like, oh, you know, I was a Girl Guide, and then we're like, oh, I was a Girl Guide as well. So it's great to see this continuity of, you know, feminist principles from, you know, I think, so I was a Girl Guide as well. And, you know, we learn these feminist principles, I think, from like a really young age as being part of the movement. And to see, and thank you for sharing just how it's structured and, you know, into the organization. I think that was very helpful for a lot of people on the line, and especially as younger organizations that are starting to see how to have intergenerational co-leadership and co-ownership built into the methodology and the institutional structure of our organizations and collectives. So I'd like to hand back to Larabe. And thank you everybody for listening to these 3 case studies. Larabe?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled and so excited to hear about all the work that has been done by these organizations. And I'm pretty sure that it will be equally helpful for those who are with us today. So let's move on to some sort of questions that I'm pretty sure everybody would be wondering. And let's also take some questions if we have some from the chat box. To start off with, I would like to ask that, you know, from Sujata, that how do you think that we create a respectful and collaborative environment?
I think, as I said before, I think the key thing is to have a trust-based relationship in terms of, and being really open to creating a space for leadership to happen, in the sense that recognizing that everybody is a leader in their own right, in their own space, and so making that space is really important, and being open to kind of listening to the different perspectives. So both from us as the older feminists, and also from young feminists, what can we learn from each other? I think that if we start off with that premise, then there's a lot that can happen. And that the example that Alinafe gave is a good one, in terms of, you know, her never thinking about teachers as a constituent group who's affected by gender-based violence. And similarly, you know, as I said, like in a policy space, we would be looking at a certain issue from a certain perspective, whereas young people would be looking at it from their perspective. And how can we meaningfully listen to each other and find common ground? Yeah.
Yes, I think even being a young person who's leading campaign here, it was really important to me when I felt like, you know, the experts and the senior leaders were equally, you know, respectful and listening to us. So next, I would also want Rahil to throw a light on how can your work from the previous intergeneration inform the feminist work we are doing now? How, you know, you can make you see that it can happen, how that work can, you know, sort of affect us, and how you can tell them.
Yeah, first and foremost, I think it's very important for young feminists to realize that a lot of hard work and sacrifice of previous generations has given us the platform and agency to do the type of feminist work that we do today. In different parts of the world, how much women or, you know, non-gender conforming people are able to realize their rights. It varies. And in many ways, it can look like, some areas of the world has more agency than others. Or like how I mentioned before about these type of mainstream narratives or sort of globalized narratives on which woman needs saving, which woman is being oppressed, can also have a very negative effect on our psyche and our own self-confidence and belief in what we can do in order to do the type of feminist work that we want to do. But we should not be fooled by this type of stuff. It's very important that we realize that we were only here because of the past sacrifices of our foremothers, right? Because of them, we have been afforded, opportunities for education, choosing, over our reproductive health. Again, this varies, in different countries, but we wouldn't have reached this point if it wasn't for the previous generations. Having that been said, that is exactly, I think, how the type of feminist work we're doing now can be informed by the past. Learning from their achievements, learning from their challenges, learning from their pitfalls, and adjusting our strategies accordingly. Another thing, if I might add, it's really interesting when it comes to any type of revolutionary change or how fast information is being spread across the world via the internet. Many people are under the impression that we have so much tools to connect and, these resources that previous generations did not have. And yet I do see plenty of times where young people are not using these tools to bring about social change. Or they're mistaken in thinking that, just by liking this or sharing this post, I'm making some type of impact. In the past, when they didn't have the internet, when they didn't have, things like Facebook, they still were able to do very effective things. So even if our methods might change from the past, I think there's still very interesting strategies, cues that we can take from the past in order to adapt it to the type of work that we want to do.
Yeah, I think you're very right, because, at the end of the day, all generations are working towards human rights. At the end of the day, what we want is very clear. So it's important how we respect each other's methods, how we have worked, the past experiences and the newer ideas. So thank you so much for your input. My next question would be from Nafisha, if I may ask that, how do we enable youth to play a leading role in decision making? And how do we make it meaningful, especially?
Thank you for that. And I'm here, I just wanted to say, the point that Rahel just made as well, just how much I agree with that. With this particular question, how do we enable, youth to play a leading role? So we're thinking about how we make it, I guess, possible for that to happen by providing a sort of ecosystem for young people to thrive. And I mean, if I'm thinking in my most utopian sense, anything in the world is possible, but it's, really making that possibility a reality that often becomes the tricky part. We often float around this idea of youth leadership, and, it's always, what we're trying to achieve, and it's this goal, but it can also sometimes feel like some sort of mystical creature, but how do we make that goal and that idea real? And, it goes back to what I said about that ecosystem for young people to thrive. And in that ecosystem, we should ensure that, we have the right tools and access for young people. So there needs to be no strings attached, funding and technical support for young people to lead their own initiatives, because decision making isn't always about, politics and governance. At its simplest form, sometimes it's about being able to make decisions about yourself and your life and your community and the issues that are affecting you. And this is something that I know that UNGEI and Saigon actively work on trying to support. There also needs to be clear and open lines of communication and, importantly, mutual respect. So this can be, creating effective channels of cooperation and information exchange among young people, and where you can, as an older organization or someone with that type of access, providing young people with a foot in the door to be able to speak to your government, your minister or your prime minister, providing those channels for young people who are often not able to just go and knock on a door or send an email and speak to the people that are effecting change. And finally, providing access for young people who are disconnected or socially or economically excluded with opportunities to participate. I find sometimes, this is in the Caribbean, and I'm sure it may apply in the rest of the world, that it's often the same young people that we see speaking on youth issues, and the ones who are actually going through real problems and who are facing the issues. Not to say that the ones in the forefront aren't, but we also need to make sure that we're reaching youth at the grassroots level, because one young person cannot speak for all. So we need to reach young people as well where they are. And another flip side of this is also ensuring that in a lot of our high-level discussions that we have, youth representatives, whether it be at the UN General Assembly or COP26 or any other type of high-level discussion, that the youth voice and the youth in the grassroots are represented. And then making it meaningful, I think it's about overhauling the way that we think about working with young people. It has to be a genuine interaction. Youth should be seen as assets, as your colleagues and important stakeholders, and not just, a young person in the panel or a young person on the board. And I think, that's the only way that we can make this area truly inclusive and meaningful.
Okay. Thank you so much. After listening all this, I really want to share some of the points that I have always thought about. I am a victim of, this tokenism approach, and that has been disappointing to a greater extent. And that's why whenever I see such platforms, I really want to highlight and I be a part of it, because I do believe that, when you have encouraging environment, that's when you can bring change. When you have somebody you see who's a leader and taking everybody with you on board, that's when you can make a change. Because young people have a lot of energy, but that energy also has to be directed in a right path. And if they are at the right path, that's when the hurdles comes in. Either it's disappointment, lack of resources, and so on and so forth. So it's really important that we take young people more as partners and not just as beneficiaries. We need young people's voices on like every table, and that has to be meaningful. And they should not be somebody as partner, as a subordinate that, you don't give them the choice. Rather, they should have their own choices, their own ways to speak. So this is something I think everybody has faced across the globe. And this is a high time that we take young people on board with us so that there's more passion. And we should provide them with more platforms, because young people do need skill set and, where they can polish themselves, where they can grow more. And we can create a great change in the world, especially after COVID. I think we have seen a lot of, distress, and how we have, faced a lot of challenges, especially living in those countries where we were already not economically so strengthened. So this is a high time that we understand the value of young people, because, wherever there's empathy, there's more progress. So thank you so much, everyone, for your participation and for the rich discussion, for all those points that you have shared with us. But before we officially close, if anyone who has anything to add as a closing remark or anything, the floor is open. I also just want to mention again that this webinar is a part of a learning series that explores meaningful young engagement in action. We will follow up with the link to join in the coming days, and we encourage you to sign up for the platform to access more resources and join our more conversations. The link will also be shared, if you may, in the chat box and in your emails. So the floor is open if there's any closing remarks, and that's it from my side. If anyone wants to say anything. We have a minute or two. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of this webinar.